The Odd Years is brought to you by the Cook Political Report team. It's our way of sharing the questions we love to ask and the conversations we enjoy having behind the scenes. If you'd like to explore more of what we have to offer, consider subscribing at cookpolitical.com/subscribe. Odd Year listeners can use the discount code ODD10, that's ODD, the number 10, to save 10% on any subscription. This offer is available only to new subscribers. Are the Davids ready?
Yeah.
Okay. Hello and welcome. We are here in Milwaukee, Wisconsin with the, can I say intimidable, David Axelrod? Is that a good?
Intimidatable.
And you're not intimidatable.
I'm with the august leadership of the Cook Report.
Political Report. Yeah. We have two Davids here, David Axelrod, David Wasserman. We are talking today on Tuesday. We've only had one day of the RNC, but we wanted to check in with David Axelrod to get his take both on what he thinks the RNC has, how that has gone, what it tells us about the Republican Party going forward for these next couple of months, and then, of course, all of the mishigas on the Democratic side. So, David Axelrod, do you want to start with what you think so far of the RNC and the J.D. Vance pick?
I think the operative word here is confidence. I think this is a confident crowd. There used to be a speaker of the Illinois House named Paul Powell, who became famous later when he was Secretary of State, and he died, and they found $800,000 in shoe boxes in his hotel room in Springfield. But I digress. But Paul Powell used to say when they had a legislative deal that looked like it was going to come together, he would say, "I smell the meat a cooking." I think these Republican delegates smell the meat a cooking. They think that they're going to win. So this has a very celebrative feel to it in a way that one wouldn't have predicted, at the beginning of this year. And I was talking to Tim Alberta from The Atlantic on my own Hacks on Tap podcast today. And, Tim said, it feels less like a unity event than a surrender. This is Donald Trump's party, thoroughly. And, of course, the events of the weekend gave it this sort of larger feel. A lot of these delegates, they believe that he was sent here by God, that he's God's candidate. And now they feel like God spared him. I mean, it's really quite something. I mean, I just, when he walked into that room last night, that arena, sober as he was, it was pretty remarkable. As to the convention itself, first of all, I don't know how people are consuming it, and maybe social media bites were good. It just reminded me how much of an anachronism these conventions are. Speech after speech after speech. They took care, they did what you do. They put sort of most of their troubling speakers early, Marjorie Taylor Greene and so on. Before prime time when the networks pick up. It was interesting that they spent a lot of time appealing to black voters, because part of the story of this election is that Donald Trump is just doing far better, particularly with younger black voters and particularly with young black men. And they had a bunch of black men speaking, Tim Scott, John James, the congressman from Michigan. One thing that I'm the only one, I think, who thought this was that significant, but it was interesting to me strategically. Both of them made the point that they felt like the Biden administration has treated illegal immigrants better than they have local communities, in their communities. Tim Scott said, they give illegal immigrants hotel rooms and veterans sleep on the street. This is a theme that's coursing through these communities. There's a real tension in the African American community about this issue. And frankly, in some of the Hispanic communities, there's an issue about. So, they presented themselves as this multicultural, new, populist, democratic party. And so from a messaging standpoint, it was interesting. But the big thing was Vance.
Yeah.
And that, to me, reflected the confidence of the Republican Party, because if you were worried about the election, you'd probably make a more conventional choice. That was Burgum. And from all the reporting, they were headed that way. And now instead of thinking about a squeaker, they're thinking about a landslide. And so they could be more venturesome. And, Vance is a guy who they're making a generational play, not just an election play. I think their thought is his populism kind of helps up there in the upper Midwest, where the last remnants of hope for Biden exist. But clearly they want to keep the franchise going, and they've decided he's the guy. It's a bet. Tucker Carlson believes he can do it. Don Jr. believes he can do it. He still has to do it. And we'll see what happens when he gets into that extraordinary pressure cooker that is national politics. Having not run that great a race to win election back in 2022, Trump propelled him into the race, and then the Democratic Senatorial Campaign Committee had to rush in $30 million at the end to save him against Tim Ryan, who was an excellent candidate on the Democratic side. So we'll see. We'll see what happens.
That's right. And it also creates this interesting dilemma for Democrats. Do they try and make Vance as much of a pariah in their messaging as Trump? Do they go after what he said about Trump in 2016 as a means of showing just the depth of skepticism that he had about Trump and try and persuade voters with that? Or do they talk about the policies he's advocated during his very short tenure in the Senate so far, which on several issues are to the right of where Trump has been with regard to foreign policy and abortion? I actually think that going after some of his past statements, his broadsides against Trump from 7-8 years ago, it speaks to how many minds have changed on the Republican side with regard to Trump, and just how much more united this party is today than it was 4 or 8 years ago.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. He was on with Hannity last night, I think, and his answer was that he was misled by false media reporting on Trump, and that's why he, because of course no one saw Trump speaking in his own words back in 2016 at those 2-hour town halls that everybody watched, but that's what he's gonna say. And yes, in some ways, you want to create a permission structure for people who were uncertain to, and so that's going to be their argument. I do think Democrats are going to use those. Calling a guy an American Hitler, maybe he meant it in a nice way. I don't know, but I don't think so.
But that permission structure kind of goes two ways too, doesn't it, David? Which is that they're trying to also make the case that a lot of people have been converted to Donald Trump. That even if you were skeptical of him maybe in 2016 or 2020, look at how much better the economy was. Look at how much safer our borders were. I know you maybe like J.D. Vance. You thought this guy's, doesn't have the character to do this job. But now, looking at where his policies were back then, maybe you can give him another shot.
Yeah. I do think this whole race, we were talking before, I think this whole race from the beginning, from their perspective, has been about one thing, which is the world's out of control. Biden is not in command. He's weak. Trump's strong. Vote Trump. Yeah. That's basically been their message from the beginning. That's been one of the challenges here, because they've had a discernible message right from the beginning that's easy to understand, and Biden's still searching for his. But the problem that Biden faces now is this message has been crystallized by two events, the debate and the assassination attempt, and two images, Biden struggling at that microphone and Trump, fighting with Secret Service agents who wanted to spirit him away from the shooting scene and thrusting his hand in the air. And by the way, just the right place for photographers to get that heroic poster shot.
With the flag in the background.
With the flag. I mean, Donald Trump has many, many deficiencies, some of them profound and frightening in a future president. But when it comes to marketing himself, the guy's an incomparable genius. And the fact that that was his instinct in a moment right after he had been shot speaks to just how preternatural that instinct is.
And speaking of flailing for a message, we saw Ron DeSantis and Nikki Haley and Trump's other primary opponents, their pollsters pretty much admitting publicly, look, we're throwing the kitchen sink at Trump and nothing's working.
Yes.
And in a way, what we're seeing from the Biden campaign now feels similar because they may be running out of effective messages here. They've had a massive spending advantage in these 7 states where they've been basically unilaterally up on the air for the last several months. And now spending is going to be at parity or potentially even in Trump's favor.
It won't be at parity. It will be in Trump's favor.
And, Biden could try to move the needle for the last several months. He's been trying to make voters feel better about the state of the economy. That hasn't moved the needle in these swing states. Pretty much his last straw has been this theme of chaos versus stability. And now that's completely shot. So where do Democrats go?
That's a really good question. I think a lot of Democrats are pondering that now. Listen, I think history is going to be a lot kinder to Joe Biden about his presidential years than voters are right now. And I think he's done some historically important things. But people don't vote so much about the past, they vote about the future. And they don't think he has one. They think that he is spent. I keep saying, Tom Brady was a great quarterback, and Tom Brady won a Super Bowl 3 years ago, and he's out of football. Why? Because he got too old. I mean, he can't throw the ball the way he threw the ball a few years ago, and that's what people think about the president. They don't, and that's really hard to overcome. And when you have to go out and answer questions all the time about whether you have the capacity to serve, and that's the focus of people's attention, very hard to shift the focus to the other guy. And when you're an embattled incumbent, and he is, you have to shift the focus to the other guy. So he's in a very tough spot, and he needs to consider what his viability is now. Because if he believes, as I'm sure he does, because I do, and I think lots of people do, that there are profound, profound implications for the country in the future if Trump wins. If he thinks the stakes are that high and he believes he can't win, then, the obvious answer would be, well, maybe someone else can and I'm going to step aside. But time is running out for that, and he's not showing any indication right now that he accepts that he can't win or that he's going to step aside. And if he doesn't, we'll see. It feels like this dynamic is set and that it's going to be very hard to disrupt.
And then we look forward to a DNC that's going to feel, if this is a celebratory experience,
Yes.
Is the DNC going to feel more funeral-like?
Not celebrative. No.
Like,
Look, I think in some ways, for Democrats, this would become more of a kind of parliamentary election, where you're arguing the party rather than the candidates.
Yeah.
And that's where the Democrats are going to have to go, because if the judgment is that Trump's going to win, then who controls the House, how many Democratic senators you can elect, becomes an issue of vital importance. And by the way, I think that's where a lot of the money will shift. I think Democrats are going to get a lot more money who are running for Congress and running for the Senate. And I think Biden will get a lot less. And I think that process has already begun. But the convention is going to be strange. I mean, in a different way.
Yeah.
There's no doubt about it. In 1932, there were two conventions in Chicago. One got a lot of attention. Franklin Roosevelt was nominated in the midst of the Great Depression, and it was he was the first president to speak to a convention, and he flew from Albany to Chicago to show that he was, first of all, active enough because people knew that he had had polio, but secondly, to show that this was a new era. The other convention that was held in Chicago that year was the Republican convention, and no one remembers it, and that was Herbert Hoover's convention. And right now it feels like that Chicago convention could be more like the Hoover convention than the
FDR.
Yeah. On the other hand, if the president makes a decision that he's going to pass the torch, there could be a lot of excitement around that convention.
Yeah, and the feel of these things has changed. These conventions aren't what they used to be. It's become fashionable for members of Congress to skip it altogether. And
yeah, I don't blame them.
Even here, where the mood inside the hall is jubilant and united for Trump, it is a bit eerie outside the hall. There are a lot of business groups that would have been here in the past that aren't, maybe more skeptical,
well,
too
maybe
hot to touch.
Heard the
Teamsters.
Teamsters Union president flay corporate America. That was the strangest thing in the whole night, because he was invited there because Trump, being transactional as he is, wanted to give him the stage because he wants to get at least him neutral, keep him neutral, or get the Teamsters to do what they haven't done in many, many years. And endorse him. I don't know. Have they ever endorsed a Republican? I don't know. Did they endorse Reagan?
Not in my lifetime.
Yeah. Well, you're young.
Well, yeah.
But,
your lifetime, I'm sorry, Dave.
I'm only
It's
1
not.
month younger than J.D. Vance, okay?
Yeah. You
good.
loser. What have you done?
Seriously.
But when he that was a rip-roaring populist dressing down of corporate America.
Yes.
Celebration of organized labor. And you could see these delegates kind of looking around saying, like, what the heck is going on here? So it was sort of in keeping with the new populist spirit that they were trying to, but I think he sort of overshot the runway there for what these people were willing to tolerate. He said he has to speak at both conventions.
Yes.
I wonder if he'll...
Apparently he is supposed to be speaking at the DNC. I don't know if that's going to...
He did get the line of the night off when he said, Donald, it was the only line that they stood for, I think. Donald Trump is one, after what happened this weekend, we all know he's one tough SOB.
Yeah.
I just hope he doesn't stand up at the Democratic convention and say Joe Biden's one old son SOB.
David Axelrod, thank you for taking time to
Hey,
chat with us.
always
Really
good to be with
appreciate
you
it.
guys.
We are, as not only big fans of David Axelrod, but huge fans of the Institute of Politics at the University of
To which
Chicago.
you guys
as
have both contributed
fellows.
so
Yes,
much.
So
Thanks for being great partners.
Yes. Yeah, look forward to more.
Thank you so much for listening to The Odd Years. If you liked what you heard or want to make a suggestion, leave us a review or recommend us to a friend. You're our best way to get the word out about what we do. If you want more podcasts from the Cook Political Report, consider becoming a subscriber, which gives you access to our new podcast, The Editor's Roundtable. The Odd Years is brought to you by the Cook Political Report and is produced by Becca Kaufman. Thank you, and I'll talk to you soon.